All right, guys, what's up? It's Jack, and welcome back to another video. And today, I want to talk about my concerns with Splitgate 2, as well as my excitement for Splitgate 2, because there's been some news coming out, and I'm equally as excited as I am concerned. So now, one of my major excitements is the fact that we are less than 3.5 weeks or so away from the open beta, and this includes all the consoles. We're having 25 plus weapons, 15 plus, or should I say infinite maps, which I don't know exactly what that means. So I'm really looking forward to that. So it's going to be a beefy beta, and it has been confirmed that the beta won't end until launch. So we don't know how long the game is going to be in beta for, but regardless, the game is going to be beefy, and there's going to be some major transitions and changes going. And then it looks like the rumors of the launch of the game being right after beta appear to be true. So that is very exciting. We're just a little over 3 weeks away from getting the game in our hands from everybody from PS4, Xbox One, and then of course PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, as well as I think Steam Deck as well. So that's very exciting. And then, of course, for me personally, I love the fact that this game is taking some of the best aspects of some of these other first-person shooters out there that happen to be arena, arcade, first-person shooters that, have certain specific elements to them. And Splitgate 2 is going to be taking pieces of those and then just putting them all in one mix, adding portals into it, and letting us go ham, right? So for me personally, that is something that I really don't mind at all. There's a lot of similarities in the gunplay with Halo, but obviously the time to kill is faster, not as fast as COD or as X-Defiant, but somewhere in the middle between where Halo is at the higher end and then obviously Call of Duty or X-Defiant being on the lower end. So this game is in particularly somewhere in the middle in terms of your average time to kill, which is a good thing. It gives a lot more access to a lot more casuals or whatnot, because one of the things that's been said ever since, the beginning of history, even when Halo was in its glory days, was, from other players out there that, let's say, got into Call of Duty, and then they tried Halo, they're like, well, I don't like the fact that when I continuously shoot my target doesn't go down. I mean, granted, it's a much longer time to kill, and of course, there's a little bit more specifics on how fast you can take down your target, but regardless, for the most part, in terms of averages, the time to kill in a Halo game is a lot longer than a lot of other games, mainly like Call of Duty or X-Defiant or even some other games out there. And then of course you got the hero element like Overwatch. You've got the because this game does have the hero element in there, and then of course you've got your jetpacks in the style of Black Ops 3. So you've got a whole bunch of things happening in this game, and that is what has me excited. And at the same time, this is what also concerns me, because, well, one of the and I've said this for years, one of the differences between your average player, that's not necessarily very well skilled, compared to your above average player that could be very well skilled or somewhere in the middle, like an intermediate level, is the fact that your better player is able to do a whole bunch of things simultaneously, while your most average or below average player can only do maybe one thing at a time, maybe two at the most, optimistically, right? So that's definitely one of the things, and as well as consistency itself with with the shooting, the shot, and all that kind of stuff. And being able to adapt to a game as well. So when you're giving the player so many tools to play with, for your average player, for which is what the game relies on to survive, to keep those players up, it may be overwhelming. Now, I'm not underestimating your average player by any means. I know that the gaming space has evolved since the days, in some ways good, in some ways bad. In other words, in some ways good, it's gotten better to where people are a lot more familiar with first-person shooters now than what they were 20 years ago when Xbox Live went live and when Halo 2 became a thing or whatnot. People are a lot more familiar, and they've gotten slightly better in skill as well compared to what it was back then in the old days, right? But at the same time, because of the evolution of games or whatnot, if players get too frustrated, they end up quitting, right? They get too frustrated, they end up quitting, and they'll either stop playing the game completely, or, you know, they're just done with the session for the day because they get, you know, whatever it is. Now, whether or not this is true, I'm not sure, but if word is constantly spread about that, and if the game's numbers end up dropping really quick, well, that is a sign of that as well. So again, the solution to this problem is not an algorithm for engagement, okay? The solution to the problem is to find a happy medium in the gameplay that doesn't ruin its foundation, but at the same time is accessible to so many skill levels. And I think that's what Splitgate 2 has is the biggest obstacle that game has to overcome, right? So, you know, it's like, okay, give players all these tools, but how do you make it to where, you know, even your casual player who may not be very well skilled or is able to only do one thing at a time, how do you make the game appealing to them as well? You know, because even when you look at something like the portals, you know what I mean? It is, you know, if you can spam it and go in and out and just go anywhere and all that kind of stuff, it could be really, really overwhelming, especially if you consider the casual player. And not only that, when you look at the days of old, like when you look at the jetpacks or whatnot, you know, Advanced Warfare, you know, Titanfall 2, Black Ops 3, Infinite Warfare, we didn't have too much of a time period when we had advanced movement. And I think one of the big reasons for that is because, well, you know, again, this advanced movement widened the skill gap, which was a great thing, right? But at the same time, there would be a lot of casual players that would end up being very, how do I put this? Very frustrated by it, right? When you look at Advanced Warfare, you know, died down pretty quickly compared to Black Ops 3 because the advanced movement was a little bit more aggressive in terms of just how fast you can move in the air, as well as you know, how you can strafe really, really quickly and stuff like that. And they had to dumb it down in Black Ops 3, which was obviously very successful. You know, so it closed the skill gap a little bit, but at the same time, there was still a skill gap to be had there with the advanced movement. But there was also a certain element of risk to it. And because of the portals, when you look at the portals, even though there's no wall running in this game, there's not much of an element of risk with the portals, especially if a player knows how to use them and manipulate them and spam them. I think if you give the portal ability too much spamability, you know, to where there's like no limit to how much you can spam it, that's like having, you know, Advanced Warfare, advanced movement with no cooldown. You can just keep on spamming that crap and just making yourself like a really cracked advanced movement player that just never lands and just strafes all over the place left and right. And for a lot of players that are, you know, your average below, you know, average casual player, they're going to be very, very frustrated with something like that. I mean, granted, they can spam it too or whatnot, but again, like I mentioned, your beginner, your above or below average casual player can only do one or two things at the most at the same time, while your more advanced player can do a multitude of things at the same time, right? So, you know, this is where a lot of games, like when you look at, you know, when Call of Duty became really, really big and stuff like that, when you look at the foundation of what made Call of Duty what it is, that game became very successful because it was still very much a grounded game, but the difference is what made that game overtake Halo. The time to kill and getting and killing an enemy was much easier. However, there was a lot of rewards that went into it, such as camos, such as the ability to rank up with prestige, unlocking attachments, and creating your own classes and stuff like that, which Halo didn't have. Now, granted, Splitgate 2 has this, which is really great. Hopefully, they'll have some sort of prestige system, which will be awesome, or some sort of progression system or something like that. I know for a fact that Splitgate developers have also been paying attention to what happened with X Defiant. They've been paying attention to what happened with their previous game in the past and everything else. So I know they've taken everything into consideration, and I know that they have the community's best interest at heart. But sometimes all you have is a first impression. When it comes to the gaming the gaming space right now in this day and age in 2025, and when you've got players that don't really have that much patience, you only have one chance to make a good impression. So in other words, once you have those players, you gotta keep them. And the way you do that is by trying to make as many of them happy as possible. So this is, I think, the biggest obstacle that the game has going for it. It's got so many good things going for it. It's got so much potential. But with all that, it seems like it's like a high risk, high reward type of game. And what I mean by that is, because of all these things that are in the game, right, which are all good things in my eyes, right? as well, everything from a development standpoint to what the game could be. Absolutely. But, again, at the same time, will it be too much for your average player these days? Even when you look at Fortnite, when they had the ability or the option to play a no build mode, this attracted many players, both skilled and non-skilled alike. So I'm not necessarily saying get rid of portals completely or get rid of this completely or whatever, but I just hope they reach this happy medium that can satisfy people, because even when you look at a game like X Defiant, the bunny hopping and the what's it called, the bunny hopping and the slight air strafing pissed a lot of players off. You know what I mean? So again, it just goes to show you that there are players out there that will stop. Like, there's one mechanic in a game, they'll stop completely. Like, if there's a mechanic in a game, they're going to stop. They're not going to play. Simple as that. I know people that didn't even play any of the advanced movement Call of Duty games because of them adding advanced movement. They're like, oh, that's not COD to me. COD to me is a boots on the ground game. You know what I mean? I remember people were pissed off when Halo added sprint. I remember people were pissed off when they added some advanced movement in Halo 5. Granted, I think that's one of the better Halos, believe it or not, from a multiplayer perspective and a mechanic perspective and even a skill gap perspective. But, overall, Halo 5 was great in my opinion. But when you're looking at it from the point of view of the player, especially your average player like that, it's like, well, I can understand where they're coming from. And again, so the question is, how do you find that happy medium to where you're not sacrificing your game, or should I say your game's foundation, for your lower skilled player, but at the same time making that lower skilled player happy while still having the elements that make your game, that separate your game apart from the other games out there? That's the big trick question, because when you look at the time to kill, it's somewhere in between, like Halo being on the higher end, Call of Duty or X Defiant being on the lower end. This game is somewhere in the middle in the time to kill department, which is great. It's not too fast, not too slow. So it's like, okay, do we do that with everything else? Perhaps. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe it's not. I'm not a developer. I don't even have all the data. I'm just speaking from my personal experience, as well as some of the concerns of other content creators. A lot of them even bigger, way bigger than I am, that have been playing games for a long time, and they're very skilled. Some of them are less skilled. Some are more skilled. But they have a point when they mention their specific concerns with this game. So far, all the feedback has been great. However, that main concern is, again, how are we going to keep these players with all these different elements they're going to have into the game that gives all these players that are good, so many tools to play with, and therefore manipulate the gaming experience to their advantage, right? I mean, granted, every player can do this, but your average casual player is not going to take the time to go as in depth. You know what I mean? So, what do you do about that? What are you going to, I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but perhaps maybe some of you guys do. Perhaps maybe a dev is listening to this and can give some feedback in the comments section down below. So with that being said, I also want to know from you, my fellow gamers, my fellow content creators, my fellow gamers, just everybody, my fellow video game enthusiasts. I want to know, regardless of whatever skill you are, I do not care. I want to know, do you guys have the same concerns as I do? Do you perhaps have answers that I have not thought of in the middle of this commentary? Is there any possible solution to this potential problem that this game might have? Because it's aiming for the moon, but at the same time, there's no guarantee that you'll reach the moon because of your own creation being the way it is, and I mean that in a respectful way, because I appreciate what the devs are doing, but I also want this to be a game for everybody, but I don't want the foundation of the game to also be, I don't want that to be sacrificed for that either. So I want to know in the comment section what you guys think. So with that being said, I'm really looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say, or should I say in this case, reading. And I like to thank everybody for taking the time to watch and or listen. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.